My husband struck me in front of his family, asserting his authority as the head of the household. 5 minutes later, his family observed the incident. As he packed his belongings, the sound of his palm striking my cheek reverberated around the dining room, yet it was his sneer that. It took about 5 minutes to dismantle our marriage, encapsulating 5 years of illusions. I thank you for participating in this remarkable endeavor. Before we begin, if you appreciate these narratives of empowerment, please consider subscribing. It is entirely free and aids us in our development. Remarkable community, let us delve deeper. I have long anticipated the arrival of this day. I never anticipated it would occur during his mother's cherished Sunday roast dinner, where the table was adorned with her finest settings. The irony of the China wedding presents she had proudly exhibited for 40 years of her submissive marriage was not lost on her. James stood there, 6 feet 2 inches tall, exuding an air of entitled arrogance with his chest puffed out. Similar to a peacock exhibiting his supremacy, his father nodded in approval, the same subtle gesture I had observed numerous times. Instances when his son emulated his behavior of controlling his partner caused his mother's gaze to lower to her plate. Behavior I had observed her refine over decades of analogous instances. I am the man of this house, James proclaimed, his voice resonating. It's time you remembered that familiar tone of superiority that has gradually undermined our marriage. The sting on my cheek was insignificant compared to the conflagration in my breast, a result of 5 years of deliberation. The submission culminated in this moment after 5 years of meticulously documenting every controlling remark and financial choice. Subtle manipulation, 5 years of constructing my escape route meticulously while assuming the role of the ideal individual. Unbeknownst to him, I had already lawfully withdrawn half of our joint savings, complete with written evidence. My donations facilitated the rental of the separate apartment, which has been equipped over several months through cash acquisitions. I have obtained a new work offer commencing next week at a firm across town, with every detail meticulously arranged. Awaiting solely this final act of public humiliation to validate its execution, you are correct, James, I stated. Calmly, my voice unwavering despite the adrenaline surging through my veins, I assert that you are the man of this household, eliciting his smirk. Victory, sparkling in his eyes, caused his sister Caroline to fidget uncomfortably. His brother Michael immediately became captivated by his roast potatoes, embodying the classic dynamics of family interaction. Denial was fully manifest as I rose slowly, my napkin intentionally positioned next to my scarcely consumed food. Why I persisted in approaching the hallway closet. You ought to possess this property entirely for yourself, the perplexed. The murmuring at the table intensified as I retrieved the pre-packed suitcase I had positioned there earlier that morning. James's expression shifted as the smirk dissolved into uncertainty. He inquired, his voice escalating with each syllable, revealing just what the head of the household possesses. I said, dragging the luggage to his feet. Inside, you will find sufficient clothing for a week, your essentials. Toiletries and duplicates of intriguing documents I have been compiling. His father began to ascend. However, I subdued him with a glance that conveyed 5 years of repressed defiance. You may wish to remain seated for this segment. Richard, this also pertains to you. I extracted a substantial envelope from my purse. Includes documentation of all joint account transactions in which funds were redirected to your private account, James. Intriguing. Once I receive my quarterly bonus and verify the consulting fees, a consistent pattern emerges. Your father's insolvent enterprise received compensation, indicating sophisticated tax avoidance. I must remark that the color faded from both men's faces. Eleanor's hands quivered as she extended them towards her water glass, while Caroline's eyes widened in a blend of terror and... Was that admiration? You cannot substantiate anything, James stammered, yet his tone lacked assurance. In fact, I can. My father not only instructed me on how to be a good wife, James, but also emphasized the importance of being a proficient accountant. Those abilities were foundational. Extremely useful in constructing my argument over the past 3 years, the stillness in the room was overwhelming after 5 years of meticulous effort. Observation had guided me on the precise placement of each verbal jab within the meticulously maintained facade of family. The facade of supremacy was fracturing, and through those fissures, decades of repressed facts began to emerge. "You have till tomorrow evening to remove the remainder of your possessions," I continued, my voice unwavering thereafter. "Locks will be altered, and the documentation will be submitted to the necessary authorities unless, of course, you chose to complicate matters." As I began to depart, Eleanor's soft voice startled everyone. "Sarah, where is he going?" I hesitated at the entrance, permitting myself a little moment of satisfaction. "He can reside in the home of the man from whom he has learned extensively. After all, isn't that the purpose of family?" As I exited, I observed the sound of James's mother commencing to weep, likely not for her son's misfortune, I surmised, but for, after 30 years of her own silence, she could never reclaim that period. At some point, the ideal mask must genuinely break. As I departed from the house that had confined me, I recognized that vengeance was not solely about revenge, was really about reclaiming the power that had always belonged to you. As my vehicle vanished from view around the turn, formerly our residence, the gravity of recent events finally impacted me. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I halted, the truth of the past 30 minutes overwhelming me like a tidal wave, the sting on my cheek having subsided. Nevertheless, the impression of his hand felt indelibly etched into my skin, not as a symbol of disgrace, but as the ultimate catalyst I had anticipated. I observed in the rearview mirror the faint redness emerging where he had impressed upon me a tangible representation of 5 years of psychological conflict. The family supper commenced like any other Sunday gathering. Eleanor had prepared her specialty roast and arranged the table with care. The precision of a lady who had devoted decades to mastering the art of domestic performance arrived early to assist. Anticipated from the conscientious daughter-in-law observing her meticulous arrangement of each fork and knife, James has been amidst the recent work-related pressures, she said when we arranged the floral centerpiece that males bear substantial loads. As caregivers, the identical narrative and reasoning she likely employed. The culmination of her husband's actions over the years was not marked by the slap, rather, it had been accumulating long before that incident. His palm struck my cheek, reminiscent of his critique over my wine selection for dinner. "Honestly, Sarah, after 5 years, I still cannot recall my preference for Cabernet with roast." The subtle shake of his father's head, and the ensuing uncomfortable silence. During the discussion, he interrupted me 3 times while I attempted to convey information regarding my latest endeavor. "Work, darling. I am certain no one wishes to discuss spreadsheets during dinner," he remarked with a patronizing smirk. Replaced the identical smile he had displayed just prior to his hand making contact with my face. The discussion unavoidably shifted to the roles of men and women in marriage, specifically with Richard James's father. He had been articulating the significance of traditional values, his voice reflecting the conviction of one who genuinely believed in them. He asserted, swirling his drink, that they were discussing universal truths regarding the issues in contemporary marriages. According to authority, women have neglected the natural order, which calls for a male to lead his household. The error of respectfully disagreeing, as I had been conditioned to do throughout the years, truly pertains to partnership. The sound of James's palm striking the table reverberated through the room like a gunshot, disrupting the atmosphere of mutual respect. "I will not permit my wife to defy my father in my own home." That is when the slap occurred, resonating throughout. The room was the culmination of years of repressed dignity. Nonetheless, what ensued was the true rupture. The essence is the smile, that self-satisfied demeanor of a man who believes he has finally subordinated his wife. The manner in which his family froze was not in terror at his actions, but rather in preparation of my anticipated submission, which they had all expected. They anticipated tears, apologies, and the recurrence of the same pattern they had observed and perpetuated. The woman bows her head, accepting her correction and possibly apologizing for provoking her spouse. Instead of action, they received 5 minutes that would dismantle their meticulously established hierarchy, now positioned in my As I approached the car, I retrieved my phone and noticed 3 missed calls from Caroline, James's sister, along with a text message. I was unaware of your situation. Do you require assistance? My hands have ceased trembling and remain stable. A profound tranquility enveloped me, characterized by unwavering conviction. I recalled Eleanor's visage as I had. She walked out with a growing comprehension in her eyes. Perhaps, just perhaps, I had shattered more than merely my own chains tonight. The breaking point transcended the slap, the smile, and even the years of insidious degradation. It encompassed the entirety of the situation. At the time I decided to convert anguish into power, humiliation into action, and stillness into strength, I started my vehicle. Once more en route to my new residence, the trunk contained the essentials I had been progressively relocating over the preceding months. Essential documents, irreplaceable photographs, my grandmother's jewelry, and all other possessions. Everything else was only props in the performance I had been executing as a street artist. I was disposable. Lights flashed past my window. I touched my cheek one more time. The sting had entirely dissipated, yet its effect remained. May resonate throughout our life indefinitely. At times, a breaking point is necessary to comprehend that you were never truly distorted, merely contorted into a form that was not yours to myself. The ensuing hours would be pivotal, as I was well acquainted with James. It's sufficient to anticipate his responses: initial incredulity, followed by rage, and then frantic attempts to regain control. However, I was finished playing the role of the supporting actress in his exhibition of machismo. The breaking point had been reached. Broke not only our marriage but also the fundamental basis of his perceived authority as I drove into. In the parking lot of my new building, I permitted myself a slight smile. The true spectacle was just commencing as I entered. The key to my new apartment door evoked recollections of the preceding 3 years of painstaking planning. It was only an escape strategy, an intricate chess match in which each move was meticulously prepared and every sacrifice weighed. Each item arranged with meticulous precision. I entered the simply furnished area, markedly distinct from the I recently vacated a magnificent property, leaving behind all the furniture, which I had acquired individually. Funds were withdrawn in incremental increments over several months, with each transaction symbolizing a progression toward liberation. Subtle act of defiance against James's domineering control over our cash, I opened my laptop and accessed the clandestine email. The account I built years ago included folders of evidence, each neatly arranged and backed up. Numerous safe clouds were accessed, prompting recollections of how each component had converged throughout the initial year, marked by the first indications. James's insistence on collaborative financial decisions, which were in fact solely his, was sophisticated, as was the manner in which money vanished from. I began tracking all transactions related to our accounts in his private investments and subsequently created spreadsheets. Monitoring each dubious transaction and every financial trick provided advantages in my role as an accountant. I knew just where to search and what to document. My fingers glided over a specific folder called Family. The internal finances contained documentation of the money laundering operation involving James and his father, alongside consulting fees dispersed to a tax cheating by a dissolved corporation, meticulously concealed as business losses. I stumbled onto this inadvertently when processing our tax records, and it has become the cornerstone of my leverage. In the second year, the psychological documenting commenced, and I began to maintain audio recordings of our conversations. Especially when he had consumed excessive alcohol, his facade would falter, revealing verbal abuse and gaslighting, all meticulously executed. Time-stamped and preserved, there were videos of seemingly innocuous family events, highlighting his domineering behavior. The behavior was evident, yet subtle enough that most would not recognize it unless they were aware of what to observe. Accessed an additional folder with emails from my therapist that shows sessions in which I addressed the emotional abuse. She had been vital in assisting me in preserving my sanity when constructing my case, instructing me in approaches to present myself effectively. While appearing agreeable, I was secretly fortifying my resolve. In the third year, I commenced physical preparations. I discreetly accumulated funds, ensuring the amount remained undetected in our accounts, and I established a secret bank account. I used my office address for communication, and I divided any bonuses I received, allocating half to our joint account. My account was, as anticipated, somewhat clandestinely redirected to my escape fund. I looked at the pictures of the bruises, but they didn't belong to me. Physical abuse resulting from incidents occurring during James's anger, such as a forcefully pushed door or a grasped arm. Photographed, dated, and attested by my physician, establishing a pattern that could not be disregarded as mere coincidence. The essential folder housed the recordings of his father's inebriated confessions during family gatherings, of which Richard was immensely pleased. His business acumen was unaware that his claims regarding tax strategies were being meticulously noted in the recording. Last Christmas, he was especially critical of his comprehensive depiction of how he instructed James in managing company finances. It would be particularly intriguing to the IRS when I stood up for my laptop, then proceeded to the kitchen to make myself a glass of wine, not James's favored Cabernet, but my preferred Pinot Noir, which I had never been permitted to purchase. The irony was not. It escaped my notice that although James believed he was managing every facet of our lives, I had been discreetly constructing an arsenal that may ruin him. My phone malfunctioned again, receiving more messages from his family. I accessed Caroline's text, "Moms. A frantic father is threatening legal action. Are you certain you wish to go with this?" I laughed at the recollection of Richard's expression when I referenced the consulting costs, which he was equally aware of. Legal action would merely unveil their meticulously concealed financial transgressions. Their threats were as vacuous as. They demonstrated their ethical superiority as I opened my authentic journal, not the counterfeit one I was carrying. I commenced documenting today's happenings in this journal for James to discover, with its predecessors chronicling each phase of my preparation every moment of. The clarity that precipitated tonight's showdown revealed that these were not merely diary entries, they constituted a testament to years. In silent struggle, the clock struck midnight, and I recognized that I had been seated there for hours, encircled by the. Tomorrow, my patient revenge will manifest as James attempts to access our joint accounts, only to discover that I have already taken action. Notwithstanding my legal entitlement, he would contact his attorney only to discover that the action would initiate the disclosure of documents he could not permit to be revealed. I shut my laptop and proceeded to the window overlooking the city lights. 3 years of preparation culminated in 5 minutes of perfection. 3 years of embodying the subservient wife while constructing the case that will ultimately liberate me. The most challenging aspect was not assembling the evidence or devising the escape plan. Rather, it was sustaining the effort. The appearance of a cheerful wife during family dinners while covertly documenting their damning discussions. Simultaneously recording each financial transaction while disregarding the subtle warning indicators while photographing. And engaging with them all. However, patience, as the adage suggests, is a virtue, and revenge, when executed after years of meticulous planning, is most effective. The responsibility of the next morning, which fulfilled my escape expectations, makes the preparation more satisfying. Disorder by 7 a.m., increasingly urgent texts, missed calls, and voicemails flooded my phone. I last saw them arrive while sipping my morning coffee, feeling oddly distant from the storm. "Sarah, your behavior is ridiculous. Please return home so we can discuss this maturely." James, 6:15 a.m. "Do you possess any?" "Uncertain about the impact your actions are having on this family, Richard." At 6:45 a.m. "Kindly, my dear, let us. Do not exaggerate this matter." Eleanor, 7 a.m. The computed response. My preparations were already underway. My lawyer, Patricia Chin, had been informed months in advance and was prepared by precisely 8 o'clock a.m. As scheduled, she commenced dispatching a sequence of meticulously composed emails. I initially visited James's law firm to report the financial inconsistencies I had discovered, followed by a visit to his father's. Business partners alluded to discrepancies in their consulting agreements. I reviewed yesterday's discussions. The scene in my memory during those pivotal 5 minutes following the smack as I have sustained it. Exemplary poise while fetching his packed suitcase, the meticulousness with which I had arranged the evidence, the deliberate. I had disclosed sufficient information to demonstrate that I possessed all the advantages without fully revealing my intentions when the doorbell rang. At 9 o'clock hours. Through the peephole, I observed James, his appearance unkempt. In contrast to his typical refined appearance, his tie was askew and his hair disheveled. Who had consistently demanded flawless presentation was deteriorating, precisely as I had anticipated. Sarah called through the "Open the door. This is absurd." I have recorded this on my phone, yet another habit. Having emerged from years of preparation, James stepped away from the door. Any attempt at forced entry will be reported to the authorities. You cannot subject me to this, authorities. I am your husband, the victim of the assault. In front of his family, my voice stayed firm and controlled. The surveillance cameras in this building are recording all activities, James. It is your decision how you wish to present this situation. I saw him strike the wall during the divorce proceedings, which was another expected reaction. James had consistently turned to physical aggression when he felt powerless, but this time was different. It would only bolster my argument. My phone vibrated with a message from Caroline. "He is at your apartment. Dad is furious." Received a call from his largest client inquiring about the consulting costs. Everything was aligning favorably. The dominoes I had meticulously placed over the years were falling precisely as intended, prompted by James's frantic appearance at my door. The inquiries from Richard's clients and Eleanor's urgent calls demonstrated that my measured approach was effective. It marks with precision via the door. I could discern James's heavy breathing, laden with frustration regarding the passwords. He stated, his voice descending to a menacing whisper, "You cannot access any of our accounts." I permitted myself a slight smile. "Check your email, James. Your father may wish to view it as well." My lawyer had just provided the documentation indicating that the new account arrangements have legally allocated my portion of each joint account. Passed out shortly before I departed the residence yesterday, the subtly concealed tax evasion scheme between father and the son was presented in unequivocal detail. "He had no right," he exclaimed. My voice faltered. "I possessed every right, just as you had the right to assume the role of the head of the household." Recall the importance of security. The guard I had previously informed emerged at the end of the hallway. "Is there a problem here, ma'am?" Mr. Crawford was just. As I departed, I spoke loudly enough for James to discern the caution in my tone as I listened to his footsteps receding. After the elevator's chime, I observed him exit the building in a fit of rage, striking the air. After entering numbers onto his phone, probably to contact his father, my phone illuminated with a call from Richard. "Allow it to go to voicemail, then play it on speaker." "Sarah, you must listen to me. Whatever you believe you are doing, you are creating a. This family possesses connections beyond comprehension." A single word from me, and I wrote an SMS in reply. "Communication from me to the IRS. Richard, your decision on the calculated response was inadequate." Both my evidence and my escape timing were relevant to understanding their psychological state. We forecast their responses and have countermeasures ready for each potential threat they could pose. Has already been predicted and neutralized. I unlocked my laptop and dispatched the final email of my prepared response to Eleanor. Included photographs documenting our marriage, including every family supper with James. Had disparaged me at every holiday when Richard lectured on a woman's place. Each instance she remained seated. Silent cooperation. The final photograph was taken yesterday, my cheek still flushed from James's slap. At times, I documented the most powerful action a woman can take is to cease accepting what she has been conditioned to tolerate. As I shut my laptop, I recognized that these 5 minutes of deliberate responding accomplished what 5 years of silent acquiescence could not in demonstrating to them. I became someone they couldn't understand, undermining their authority and perspective while they thought they got rid of me. This is the true power. Did not reside in the evidence I had collected or the threats I might formulate. It lay in the instant they comprehended that the subservient wife they believed they had fashioned had been arranging their demise all along since that initial night of. True freedom felt weird as the energy from the day's encounters gradually dissipated, leaving me standing still. in my new bedroom, encompassed by the meticulously selected elements of my new existence. The quietness here was distinct, not the oppressive quiet of treading on eggshells, but the tranquil stillness of. The incessant buzzing of my phone has finally ceased. The last message I received was from Eleanor, a mere EY. Comprehend that the implicit significance of those two phrases lingered in the digital realm between us in response to my email. She may have perceived her own unfulfilled potential in my actions, the paths not pursued in her life, like the flying monkeys. Initiated their attack the following morning, commencing with the mutual acquaintances. Their communications were a meticulously arranged amalgamation of. James is devastated by Sarah's actions, and he feels concern and guilt. Could you not have approached this situation differently? Consider his feelings. This could jeopardize his profession. Every relationship experiences difficulties. However, you are discarding it. Years of marriage diminished by a single error. I had anticipated this outcome. Each message elicited the same reply. Image of my contused cheek, succeeded by the inquiry, would you offer this counsel to your daughter? The ensuing stillness was. Subsequently, familial pressure emerged from James's cousins, aunts, uncles, and others. Someone who had previously smiled benignly at his domineering behavior for years suddenly expressed strong ideas regarding vindictiveness. Their communications encompassed emotional manipulation to overt threats, although an unforeseen element emerged. Support arrived from unexpected sources, including Caroline, James's sister. Arrived at my flat with a bottle of wine and tears in her eyes, I have observed him evolve into a paternal figure over the years. As we sat on my new couch, she said, I should have spoken up or taken action. You are taking action now. As she poured her another drink, my phone illuminated with a message from Michael, James's brother, indicating that the family was in disarray. My father's attorneys are working diligently, but I want you to understand that you made the correct decision. Certain matters must disintegrate to facilitate progress. The most unexpected ally was James's young niece, Emma. At 16, she initiated a group chat with her female relatives to share the documentation I had compiled regarding James's behavior. Aunt Sarah presented us with a warning sign checklist, indicating that we need not take this as normal. She had documented her thoughts on the matter. The ability of these young ladies to see red flags early instilled in me a profound sense of pride in the establishment of a new support system. I embraced vulnerability in ways I had previously neglected and reconnected with old friends who had distanced themselves during my anticipating rejection in marriage, yet discovering the welcoming embrace we had long awaited. My college friend Lisa expressed during our initial lunch reunion that we desired your return since we cherished the Sarah we knew. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, assisted me in traversing the emotional terrain of freedom which still resided within me. She elucidated throughout our session that you are encountering a distinctive experience. Most survivors of abuse grapple with the repercussions of. Evade the consequences of a well-achieved liberation. Emotions vary. Nevertheless, they require processing. He was correct. There was remorse, not for departing, but for achieving success. Where many others failed, there was no longer dread of James, but rather concern over the repercussions my actions would incite. Through generations of his lineage, I felt sorrow, not for the marriage I had forfeited, but for the years I had invested. My sanctuary became work as I focused on preparing rather than enjoying. I had already established the foundation for success there. Silently thriving while upholding the pretense of the apathetic corporate spouse, now liberated from obligation. To diminish the significance of my accomplishments, I immersed myself in tasks with increased vigor, and my supervisor, Sarah Chin, engaged me in her initiatives. In the office a week after the incident, she remarked, I always knew you were restraining yourself, as she passed a folder across her desk. An opening for the department head post is available. The interview is yours if you desire it. This role entails a substantial salary increase, an elevation and, more significantly, an opportunity to mentor other women inside the firm. The irony about James's career was not overlooked by me. Was collapsing under the burden of revealed financial misconduct, while mine was ascending. Each day presented fresh obstacles. Additionally, I achieved additional triumphs by learning to occupy the center of the bed and selecting restaurants based exclusively on my preferences. Desires for laughter without assessing the appropriateness of my joy, tiny liberties that felt monumental thereafter. Years of constraint resulted in a significant transformation. The woman in the mirror had improved posture and a more pronounced smile. Gazed back at me with unclouded eyes that no longer bore the weight of perpetual scrutiny. He was not merely. She was thriving. Late one night, perhaps 2 weeks after I received an unexpected email from Eleanor. I filed for divorce today. Richard remains unaware. I appreciate your demonstration that it is never too late to begin anew. Would you be willing to meet me for coffee? I responded affirmatively to her offer, recognizing that the consequences of my deliberate retribution had transformed into. It evolved into a symbol of significance beyond mere punishment, illuminating pathways to liberation for others. Trapped in the same patterns, the woman who had been struck at a family dinner was replaced by another individual. She was stronger not due to the revenge she had executed, but because of the freedom she had attained. The aftermath was not merely concerning the survival from the explosion I had caused. It pertained to constructing something exquisite from the remnants, the coffee shop. The location where I encountered Eleanor was neutral ground, distant from both of our customary locales. She appeared diminished in some way, without Richard's commanding presence beside her. Her hands quivered slightly when she stirred. The diamond ring that she had worn for 40 years was conspicuously lacking when Richard received it. This morning, she softly stated that he hurled the divorce papers at his lawyer and insisted they be contested, like to James. The social fallout commenced disseminating through our groups rapidly, undermining the well-crafted picture. The prosperous father-son business duo was deteriorating, and their country club membership had been discreetly suspended. Former friends, facing looming probes into their financial practices, suddenly could not recall their phone numbers. The Ladies' Auxiliary Committee informed Eleanor, maintaining a trace of bitterness. They believed it prudent for me to withdraw from planning the annual charity event, 40 years of, due to the amusement in her voice. Optimal table arrangements have become a burden for me. The reality was unraveling there. James's law firm has placed him on indefinite leave while they complete their internal investigation. His father's business partners launched an investigation into the financial irregularities I'd disclosed. During an external audit, Caroline found their meticulously built empire crumbling under the weight of exposed falsehoods. Later that day, she contacted me, her voice filled with excitement. "Sarah, you won't believe what transpired at Dad's office today. The FBI arrived with warrants about dubious fees and tax evasion. Michael's wife disclosed the entire situation. On Facebook, before anybody could intervene, social media became a battleground for reputations. Screenshots of James's threatening communications to me were disseminated among our mutual friends and his former lovers. Commenced recounting their personal narratives of controlling behavior, as the meticulously crafted image he had upheld was becoming divided by the cumulative influence of communal experiences, the country club cohort. The societal pillars that had previously ignored James's conduct for years were now confronting their own reckoning. Spouses who had observed my silent suffering were hard to confront their complicity with husbands who had admired James's traditional values involved the realization that their spouses were establishing independent bank accounts, specifically Margaret. Wilson contacted me today, and I informed my therapist during our appointment, recalling her as the one who remarked on my fortune. Her husband possesses a formidable will, and she inquired whether my attorney would confer with her daughter. The ramifications were significant. Indisputable young ladies within our social circle were critically evaluating their relationships with a fresh perspective on males. They were confronting their casual misogyny, which had previously been considered the norm under established gender roles. The factors that had supported our social circle were being removed, and James's efforts to retain control became progressively more challenging. Desperate, he attended social events uninvited, attempting to present his perspective, yet the evidence I have collected speaks otherwise. His boasts about concealing assets from those less fortunate resonate more loudly than his objections. The comprehension of business was especially detrimental when presented in a partners' meeting, leading to the deterioration of Richard's reputation. His previously formidable network, now startlingly feeble, deteriorated even more rapidly. Upon encountering a federal probe, erstwhile business associates rapidly distanced themselves from the individual. A community leader, taking pride in his role, watched as that group rejected Eleanor's social status. A circle dramatically divided several pals who found themselves ensnared in analogous marriages. Rallied around her with unanticipated intensity, others committed to preserving the current quo regarded her as. The women's book club she had held for 20 years unexpectedly discovered a new venue, although the most intriguing aspect was a local women's support group was sharing my story online while anonymizing the information. I am disseminating the tactics I employed to document the abuse and devise my escape, detailing my systematic approach to liberation. Mom's divorce announcement provided a blueprint for others, as Caroline mentioned during dinner. She demonstrated courage to her friend Patricia by leaving David last week, applying what she had learned from your example, which she had documented. He meticulously devised a plan and abruptly departed one day when he was at work, coinciding with the apex of the social media frenzy. In a state of inebriation and anger, James launched an extensive diatribe against ungrateful spouses and familial principles. By morning, his law firm had observed sufficient grounds for termination on LinkedIn and all platforms. A notice referenced behavior inconsistent with the firm's values. His father's answer was, Richard's attempts to intimidate his way out of the position are equally self-destructive, only exacerbating his predicament. Golf club associates, formerly impressed by his economic acumen, now averted eye contact in the hallways. The emperor had. Without a tire, all could ultimately acknowledge they had perceived it all along. The most impactful moment occurred during a charitable event. I attended an event where my new department head, Eleanor, made her first public appearance after filing for the position. The whispers trailed her until she arrived at my table without reluctance. I stood and embraced her, proclaiming for all to hear, I have reserved a seat for you here. The message next to me was clear. The outdated societal structure was based on suppressed realities. Enforced quiet was disintegrating, giving rise to something novel. A community of women who have discovered their voices, men who opted to be allies instead of oppressors, and a collective social conscience. It could no longer be acquired through philanthropic contributions and country club memberships once spring emerged in the 6 months have elapsed since that pivotal Sunday supper, marking the commencement of my new existence in the city. The woman who had departed from her marriage had metamorphosed into an individual she scarcely recognized. More robust, more vivid, unconfined by the limitations of others' expectations. The elevation to department head included an office with a view of the city skyline, serving as a daily reminder of my progress. I have emerged from the remnants of my previous existence. The walls that once bore witness now exhibit my professional certificates and award successes that I had previously been compelled to minimize to evade. Sarah Chin, my supervisor, commented during our discussion that you have entirely transformed the department, overshadowing James's ego. The quarterly evaluation of the mentorship program initiated for young female accountants is precisely what we required. The board is impressed. The program has been my passion project, originating from my own initiative. A mandatory training session established experience in identifying financial misuse. Instructing young professionals to identify warning flags, I had learned to capture the overwhelmingly threefold response. Employees had previously exited abusive relationships following their therapy appointments with Dr. Martinez. Transitioned from crisis management to personal development, you are no longer merely enduring, as she noted during. In one session, you are the focus. Let us discuss the implications for your future. The term future has lost its significance. The burden of dread previously occupied my calendar with hobbies I was denied throughout my marriage, such as painting lessons and salsa dancing. Dancing weekend excursions with reacquainted pals, each novel encounter felt like regaining a fragment of my identity that had The healing process was not solely professional and emotional, it was also physical, as my body began to recall past experiences. Its own rhythms liberated from the perpetual strain of expecting criticism. Commenced yoga sessions, perceiving my spine align and fortify with every session, the woman reflected in the mirror. He stood taller, smiled with more ease, and exuded an inner confidence that was not dependent on external validation. Eleanor's metamorphosis mirrored my own following her divorce. She ultimately enrolled in community college courses, realizing a desire that Richard had disregarded decades earlier when we met. Weekly gatherings for coffee to share minor triumphs and provide mutual support during difficult days have led me to discover my. She informed me one afternoon, her eyes gleaming with enthusiasm, about the antiquated art equipment in the attic, while Richard despised my painting. The Phoenix Rising was not solely about the personal. My achievement involved assisting others in realizing their potential. I began delivering speeches at women's shelters to share my experiences. The narrative and the pragmatic measures I implemented to extricate myself from my systematic documenting process evolved into a template disseminated through. Caroline participated in these meetings, contributing her experience as a member of support networks and advocacy groups. Raised in a household of disciplined women, we collaboratively established a program entitled Breaking the Cycle to assist others. Identify and address patterns of financial and emotional abuse. Ironically, Caroline remarked after an exceptionally impactful session in which James and his father consistently emphasized the importance of familial legacy. Our true legacy is in empowering other women to discover their strength, which has also fostered personal growth in my relationships. Dating guys appeared to be an unfamiliar notion following years of arranged marriage, but I gradually started to trust my discernment. I've once again learned to recognize genuine respect and to appreciate men who receive praise. Instead of hindering my success, my initial post-divorce date was with a colleague from a different firm, a reserved and contemplative individual who listened more than he spoke. When he inquired about my job aspirations and patiently awaited my response, I recognized how minimal. I set my expectations prior to the unexpected emergence of self-forgiveness, not for my departure, which I had never questioned. Dr. Martinez assisted me in recognizing the years I had dedicated to planning rather than living. On the other hand, she clarified that those years were not in vain. They comprised your cocoon phase, with every moment of preparation being crucial. Documented, you kept every minor act of clandestine opposition. These were the threads you employed to fashion your wings. The definitive assessment of my development occurred when James made a final effort at reconciliation by appearing at my office. Humbled by his diminished circumstances and damaged reputation, the former James would have demanded, threatened, and exerted control over this situation. The individual inquired, almost courteously, whether we may converse. He asserted that he had transformed while seated across from my desk during therapy. Anger management. I am no longer the same individual as I was on that day at dinner. I observed him intently, carefully observing the fashionable suit that no longer fit properly, the subtle tremor in his palms, the guy who had once. I appeared immensely powerful, yet suddenly felt diminutive in my properly furnished office, encircled by manifestations of my success. I believe you have changed, I said, my voice steady, but so have I, and this version of me merits more than an. As security took him out, I sensed the last remnants of my former personality dissipate, akin to a phoenix. It does not return to the ashes from whence it emerged. Instead, it ascends with greater strength. Endured the flames that evening. While standing in my home office, I ultimately removed the final photograph from In its designated location, I displayed a painting that Eleanor had crafted, depicting a phoenix in flight. Its wings extended broadly against the early sky below. She had inscribed, "Thank you for teaching me to rise, 1 year to the day." Following that pivotal Sunday dinner, I positioned myself at the platform of the National Conference for Financial Empowerment, ready to present the keynote presentation. The irony was not lost on me regarding my expertise in documenting financial abuse has evolved from a revival technique into professional acclaim for our next speaker. The introducer proclaimed a transformation in our comprehension and mitigation of financial abuse within relationships. Kindly welcome Sarah Mitchell, author of Silent Ledgers, Breaking Free from Financial Control, a book conceived from the comprehensive documentation of my personal experience has achieved bestseller status in the business and self-help categories. Each chapter served as a meticulously constructed manual, instructing others to identify and transcend the patterns I had acquired. The advance alone exceeded James's annual pay at Sweet. The essence of revenge lay not in the success itself, but in the total inversion of power, with James now employed at a little suburban establishment. The law firm attempted to obstruct the book's publishing with a cease and desist letter. Sat framed at my home office, it serves as a reminder of my progress from the lady who would have previously succumbed to such threats. During the Q&A session following my speech, a familiar face arrived at the microphone, Eleanor, finely attired. An artist, adorned with paint splatters, stood confidently as she addressed the audience, having lived 40 years in financial hardship. In darkness, she spoke, her voice loud and resolute. How can we assist women in acknowledging their worth before it requires decades to do so? The audience was unaware that she was my former mother-in-law, nor did they know about her art gallery exhibition. Works by survivors of domestic abuse have recently obtained a significant grant that they did not receive previously. Richard's efforts at reconciliation were met with restraining orders and public opposition. Humiliation. My response was straightforward. We lead by example, demonstrating that achievement is attainable, is not determined by the magnitude of their husband's financial resources, but by the fortitude of their own determination. Revenge intensified with each minor triumph, particularly as James's new girlfriend had conducted an online search about him prior to their third date. I discovered my TEDx lecture on identifying controlling tendencies. She terminated the relationship instantly at Richard's country club. Membership was irrevocably rescinded upon the public revelation of the magnitude of his financial misdeeds, although the most gratifying. Revenge manifested in unforeseen ways. The women's shelter where I volunteered named a financial literacy program after. Former clients from James's law firm commenced soliciting my consulting services on identifying concealed assets in divorces. My approach to documenting abuse evolved. As part of the normal training for domestic violence counselors, Caroline called one evening with news that was significant. She claimed that my father tried to join the new golf club in Westbrook, a claim that made me laugh heartily. They conducted a Google search on him, and unexpectedly, their membership reached capacity. Nonetheless, they subsequently invited his mother to exhibit her artwork. In their main hall, the local newspaper published a major article regarding Eleanor's metamorphosis from country club spouse to renowned artist and advocate. The photographs depicted her in her studio, encircled by striking paintings. The reporter observed that her ex-husband refrained from commenting on the story, women breaking free from various bonds. James. He made a final effort to re-establish control by attending a book signing and queuing like any other participant. Upon arriving at my seat, he set my wedding photo in front of me instead of my book, prompting a recollection of my past happiness. Inquired audibly for adjacent spectators to perceive prior to your transformation, I retrieved. Upon quickly examining the photograph, the smile on my former self's face appeared flawless, yet hollow as I gazed up at James. I recognized what I had previously overlooked, a diminutive guy yearning for significance. Would you like me to sign this as well? I inquired. I am contentedly uncapping my pen to express gratitude to James for imparting the lesson that the most effective retribution is to thrive. Should I date this? The murmurs and phone cameras surrounding us indicated that this encounter would soon go viral. James withdrew, leaving the photograph behind. I incorporated it into my speaking materials as a visual help for recognition. The distinction between an authentic smile and a facade lies in the final retribution, which was not found in James's demise or Richard's. It was a disgrace. My accomplishment was not the focus, but rather the ripple effect of empowerment disseminating across our society. Young ladies who had previously admired my ideal marriage were now participating in my workshops on financial independence. Men who had mimicked James's domineering behavior unexpectedly found themselves single at the conclusion of my keynote address. Announced a new program by a foundation offering grants to assist women in escaping financial abuse, with the first winner identified. Will be disclosed next month at a gala staged in the same country club where James had previously held court successfully. The audience is not concerned with retribution. It is focused on achieving liberation and thereafter facilitating the path for others to follow. After departing the stage to a standing ovation, my phone vibrated with a message from Eleanor, just sold my portrait series, Men Who. It is speculated that Kings acquired the centerpiece from James's old law firm, which they are displaying in their lobby. Dedication to their revised ethical norm. I recalled the prominent image in that series, depicting a guy on the throne of paper currency, his crown faltering, while women in business attire passed by, their shadows elongating. At times, the most gratifying retribution is merely becoming what they claimed you were incapable of being 2 years later. On that transformative Sunday evening, I stood before my full-length mirror, adjusting the CEO nameplate on my new attire. The office door now signifies not merely the department head, but the chief executive officer of my own financial consultancy firm. Specializes in assisting women in attaining economic freedom. The ultimate triumph was not signified by a certain event, but by the significant understanding that I no longer define myself in reference to James or the events involving the woman who. The reflection that gazed back at me in the mirror was neither a survivor, an ex-wife, nor an advocate of women's financial empowerment. Despite embodying all these qualities, she remained authentically and compellingly herself. My phone vibrated with a text from Eleanor has recently completed my final treatment session, during which the therapist indicated that I am prepared to author my own book. Would you assist in writing it? Her change had been as thorough as my own, the once timid woman who, having spent decades in Richard's shadow, today it possesses one of the most esteemed galleries in the city, specialized in art therapy and empowerment. Her narrative became unexpectedly entwined with mine as we both ascended from. We sought to escape the same repressive environment to discover our own ways, the final element of victory manifested as an offer. The National Association of Women in Finance requested my leadership for a panel on domestic financial abuse, a topic that is not uncommon. Law students attended this panel, which was different from others I've attended. James's new employment mandated attendance for ethics training. Are you certain you wish to proceed? Caroline inquired. When I informed her that she does not owe them anything, I responded that it is not a matter of obligation. It concerns demonstrating that the conclusion of one narrative can herald the commencement of a superior one. On the day of the panel, I donned the identical red dress I had donned on that awful Sunday, not as a reminder of anguish, but as a mark of my progress. The smack that once seared my face had become the catalyst for a movement that assisted hundreds of women in discovering their. James was seated in the back row with his students, having aged more than 2 years beyond what could be expected. His hair was impressive at the temples, but his posture was less authoritative. Our eyes briefly met as I ascended the platform. For the first time, I had an absence of emotions, no hatred, no fear, no happiness with his downfall. Had become extraneous to my narrative. Financial abuse I initiated is not solely about money. Pertains to power, control, and the systematic degradation of self-worth, nonetheless. Today, we are not here to discuss victimhood. We are here to address victory, as I tell my narrative, our narrative. Observed the expressions of the audience, young women diligently taking notes with intense resolve, while men were restless. Contentedly as they acknowledged their own behaviors, while in the back row, James observed the complete manifestation of the. A young student approached me after the panel, anxiously peering about, attempting to suppress his strength. She murmured to James, "I am in a relationship," and added, "Everything you described, I have never had the words to articulate." Before I presented her with my card, I observed her swiftly conceal it in her pocket. The seed of freedom initiated another circle, culminating that evening I facilitated. A little dinner gathering in my penthouse apartment featured Eleanor, who was displaying photographs from her recent exhibition, Caroline. She announced her promotion to partner at her consulting firm, which included James's niece Emma, who is currently a law student. Eleanor reflected on the completion of her journey, having specialized in women's rights. 2 years ago, a Sunday supper caused our separation. Now we are here, strengthened by it. Although financial success was gratifying, it was not the culmination of victory, nor did it reside in professional achievements. Not the praises or the lives we changed, but the peaceful assurance that we had become who we were meant to be. Intended to be not in defiance of our history, but because we opted to convert it into a catalyst for development. When my guests departed, that evening I stood on my balcony observing the city lights twinkle like stars, reminiscent of the woman who had once devised her covert escape now orchestrated expansions of her enterprise in full view. The hitherto suppressed voice has now emerged. Thousands of hands that had previously trembled now grasped the reins of her own fate with unwavering assurance. Dr. Martinez sent a final note regarding your panel today. Please remember, when you initially approach me with your escape plan, observe your current state. This is not merely a win, Sarah. This is transcendence. The ultimate victory transcended the notions of winning or losing, revenge or redemption. It was about realizing that the individual I had been striving to become had always been, awaiting the requisite bravery. As I emerged, I felt my cheek, recalling the sting of the slap that had initiated everything which had appeared. In attempting to subordinate me, James had accidentally facilitated my progress, as an ending had truly marked a beginning. Perceive it neither as his spouse nor as his prey, but as the architect of my own fate. The cycle was fulfilled. The narrative reached its authentic conclusion not at the instant I departed, but in the woman I evolved into by advancing forward. Myself,